2012, Olympia, Washington. In a December 20, 2012 article, The Voice asks, "Can men be feminists?" My answer, unfortunately, yes. Naima Pratton disagrees. Quote, "You can't be a feminist unless you have a vagina. The Oxford English Dictionary defines feminism as the advocacy of women's rights on the grounds of sexual equality. Yet this does not mean everyone who supports women's rights can be called a feminist." Close quote. If only that were true, but it's not, and the Oxford English Dictionary definition is outdated too. I define second-wave feminism as advocacy of women's superiority on the grounds of stereotyping women as good victims and men as evil predators. But third-wave feminism seems to be more a product of the anime world. I've defined that as, "Boys are icky, you go girl." But I digress. Pratton continues, quote, "As much as some males may proclaim, men will never understand women. They will never have to experience life as a woman and everything that being the fairer sex entails. I am in no way confessing to be an ardent feminist. However, I, as a rational woman, am a supporter of the feminist movement." Close quote. Okay, men will never understand women. Well, women spend hours looking at magazines filled with pictures of emaciated women wearing something called fashion. These include shoes that nobody in their right mind would wear, like high heels. They fawn over them, buy them, wear them, and then blame their obsession for footwear on men. And the money they spend on frou-frou outfits is beyond belief. And again, men are to blame. Feminists blame men for women's fashion, claiming we drive women to it to satisfy our evil male lust for women to make themselves look like Barbie dolls. Except when the subject is sexual harassment, then women's attire is about anything and everything but men. And men are stupid for thinking it has anything to do with them. Do feminist women have to dictate what it means to be male? More from Pratton. Quote, "I do not need a man to dictate to me how to be a feminist or even worse, a woman. Feminism is about seeking the end to the oppression of women, and I, for one, do not want to achieve this on men's terms, whether they claim to be feminist or not." Close quote. Men cannot be feminists, according to her, because if a man could be a feminist, as all men are evil, women oppressing bastards who have to dominate every woman around them, they will then take over the feminist movement and dictate to her what that is to mean. Oh no. So feminist women have to dictate to men how we ought to be men. Some people would say Pratton is being charming and mysterious when what they really mean is that her argument is irrational. No mystery there, it's just goofy. Either she assumes that, decades of evidence to the contrary notwithstanding, female feminists will not attempt to dictate to her how to be a feminist. Second-wave feminists have done it for decades. Or she's content to be dictated to by women but not by men. Maybe she's a lesbian sub looking for a mistress. When it comes to personal choices, I don't judge. But her argument is just plain goofy. Sadly, it does not end here. No, there's a male in the mix too, and he argues that men not only can be feminists, but that they should be feminists. Quote, "It is not merely true that men can be feminists, they all should be feminists. How can you change society without changing the attitudes of men? I consider myself a feminist, and I see no reason why this has to be a problem." Close quote. Alex McDonald in The Voice. He's right, of course. Men can be feminists, but like Pratton and much of the rest of the Western world, he confuses women are good victims and men are evil predators, second-wave feminism, and boys are icky, you go girl, third-wave feminism, with advocacy of women's rights on the grounds of sexual equality. Most of the goals of first-wave feminism have been achieved. Where inequalities persist, they largely favor women, such as the military draft, or they pertain to the 1%, where most men suffer the same inequality. His view of society is also flawed. There are certain attitudes that are more or less innate and almost instinctual. Most women and men reach a stage in their development where they instinctively want to knock boots with the members of the opposite sex. The girls get shy, the boys get tender, they slobber on one another, share enzymes, bacteria, and viruses, reproduce, play house, and fight over who gets control of the remote and who has to take out the garbage. Women drive men out of the house to hunt buffalo and bring home the bacon so the women will dance in the sheets with him and then turn into a six-pack and the remote control. Supposedly, men only want one thing. Beer and the remote is two things, actually. Which drives women to shop for shoes and frou-frou outfits and smear toxic industrial waste chemicals on their faces and behind their ears in an attempt to make the guy interested enough to keep hunting buffalo and bringing home the bacon, but not so interested that he keeps demanding beer and the remote, or whatever it is that all men are supposed to be obsessed with. These attitudes seem to be innate. There's no changing them, although the elite seem hell-bent on trying. Want to make the not wealthy men more like women? Flood the environment with estrogen. Certain plastics leach an estrogen-mimicking chemical into the food and liquids we store in them. Many of the pesticides that saturate our food mimic estrogen. Toxic industrial waste chemicals sold as skin lotions contain chemicals that mimic estrogen. Worse, beer is loaded with estrogen. Yes, I know, but it's true. Hops are rich in plant estrogen. Speaking of plant estrogens, flaxseed oil, the one that doctors tell you to take to get your omega-3 fatty acids, is rich in estrogen. I take pumpkin seed oil instead. No estrogen there, all testosterone of the kind that makes manly plants. Okay, that didn't make sense, but it's true. Beyond turning all of us 99% men into girly men, however, there's no changing the nature of the beast. We are what we are. Let's work with that. Most of us are fair-minded, which could explain why so many of the first-wave feminists were men. What was the first state in the United States to give women the vote? The Mormon state of Utah. Who gave it to them? Men. And women would have achieved suffrage much sooner, but for the temperance movement, which advocated suffrage for women so that they could outlaw booze. Men's attitude toward sexual equality for women is largely a done deal. With few exceptions, it's accepted. So what else is there? MacDonald explains, quote, I recognize the exploitation and harassment that women face at the hands of men, and I find it repulsive. All men are capable of recognizing it. Just because the majority don't doesn't mean they are incapable, close quote. By harassment, he means sexual harassment and sexually aggressive humor and casual misogyny. The second-wave feminist harpy, Catherine McKinnon, created the legal concept of hostile environment sexual harassment. I've written several articles on the topic, and there is a wide gulf between hostile environment sexual harassment as a legal concept and how it is deployed. In practice, it's a little more than a prissy condemnation of male sexuality, and that's what MacDonald means. Whether you get a man whenever you get a man condemning male sexuality, you know he's either trying to impress women with his sensitivity to advance his career, or get good grades, or he's trying to get laid. Which is it for MacDonald, I wonder? The myth of male liberation. Quote, but feminism strives for male liberation too. The great myth for men about women's liberation is that it will somehow result in the marginalization of men in society, close quote. That was MacDonald again. Feminism strives for male liberation? Yeah, that's what Gloria Steinem wrote in the Washington Post back in the 1970s, and it's still a lie today. Feminism wants to liberate men from having any reproductive choices and from having any rights as fathers. And they want to liberate men to pay taxes to cover the costs of many free health services for women but few for men, to receive longer sentences and harsher penalties for identical crimes, to be pre-condemned as inherently violent and treated like dangerous criminals, though individually we've committed no crimes, and to be the first to die but the last to be loved. The only things feminists truly want to liberate men from is our money and our lives. To make his case, MacDonald raises the standard feminist canard that we oppose women's liberation. That's nonsense, unless by liberation they mean the liberation of socialism, in which the beneficiaries are liberated from having to support themselves because society, which for feminists means men, do all the dirty, dangerous, and dull work and pay all of the costs. The foundation of second-wave feminism is socialist, and third-wave feminism is not far removed, so this could very well be what they mean. Socialism aside, I know of no man who opposes women's liberation. Well, that was then. MacDonald asserts that feminists oppose sexist laws that penalize men, despite that volumes have been written in Canada, the U.S., and Great Britain demonstrating that feminists support and often lobby for laws that penalize men. Undeterred, MacDonald persists, quote, "You don't have to be a woman to hate patriarchy. It's simply inarguable that women are underpaid, undervalued, and exploited. 40 years after the Equal Pay Act, women working full-time in the United Kingdom are still paid on average 14.9% less per hour than men. The media still objectifies and patronizes women," close quote. His assertion about women's pay is eminently arguable. Though Warren Farrell did his research for why men earn more in America, because the behaviors he documents reflect fundamental truths about human sexuality, there is little doubt that his conclusions apply with equal validity to England. The pay gap has almost nothing to do with sexism, and the Man, Woman, and Myth video project has done an incredible job of demonstrating that, among other things, the media also objectifies and patronizes men. Pratton is wrong. Men can be feminists. But both Pratton and MacDonald demonstrate a remarkable ignorance about feminism. For the Backlash at Backlash.com, my name is Rod Van Mechlin.